the hardest learning that I've had is that progress isn't linear. You do need those checkpoints to reflect and go, I'm doing okay. My business is primarily built on a philosophy rather than a product. Their biggest strength is also their biggest weakness. And I think that's so true of running your own business.
This is the Education Business Podcast for all founders and business owners in the education sector. This podcast is for you if you have an education business or you're thinking about starting one. That could be tutoring, publishing, holiday clubs. It really doesn't matter. You're in business and you're also in education. But most of all, you're focused on improving outcomes for children in the way you know best, through your business. I'm Claire Riley, co-founder of educational resources website Classroom Secrets, and I'll be sharing how to make your education business bigger, better, and have more impact through my own experiences and also the conversations I have with other founders and business owners in education. The Education Business Podcast is sponsored by Classroom Secrets, helping you to support your children's learning. Kate, welcome to the Education Business Podcast. Tell us your story. How did you get into teaching? What was it that was the catalyst for you to leave teaching and set up your own education business?
Hi Claire, thank you so much for having me on. So I think that I could probably be described as a born teacher. And the reason I say that is because I never wanted to do anything else. Even from the youngest age, all of my role play was teaching teddies or teaching my sisters. And my own education journey, all I remember is just that it was always really about, well, what's the next bit I need to do or the next step I need to take to become a teacher? I also had two very different experiences of primary school when I was little because I went to two different schools. The first one, I wasn't very happy and I didn't enjoy school. And then the second one was the opposite of that. I absolutely loved it. And I had an experience of what a really exciting and interesting education felt like. And I think that those two, although I didn't realise it at the time, those two experiences also had a profound impact on not only me wanting to become a teacher, but also in the type of teacher that I wanted to become. And they gave me a really clear North Star and a really strong set of values that have served me really well throughout my teaching career. And if you'd have said to me, even probably 5 years ago, that I would be here talking to you on your podcast all about being an education business owner, that I probably wouldn't have believed you. So I suppose the question is, how do I find myself here then? And the answer to that is, over the course of the last 10 years, maybe a bit more than that now, I could feel a real shift in education. And it was a shift that was starting to pull me too far away from that North Star and too far away from that set of values. But I was just finding it too hard in the moment to get the headspace I needed to find the answers to that. And I knew that I wanted to be able to say, okay, those are the systemic pressures. These are the external pressures. Now, what do I need to do to be able to continue to provide an education that feels fun in the moment and that's meaningful for the future? And I just couldn't get into that creative headspace enough to be able to do that. And I knew there were answers and I knew that there would be solutions to these challenges, but I just couldn't get there. So I made the difficult but the right decision to leave the classroom and find that headspace. And a month or so later, I founded my company, which is called What If Education, which is all about asking provocative questions and finding solutions and answers for educators so that we can continue to provide the education that we want to, despite whatever is happening out there.
I really enjoy listening to people's stories and finding out how they ended up where they are now. So thank you so much for sharing that. So you were a teacher and then you left and you set up your own business. Talk me through that early process. Did you do anything before you left to help you set your business up? Did you wait until you left completely? What did those early days look like? Because for me, I remember thinking, okay, I've got this business now, and I was on supply at the time, and I'd always willed to not get work so that I could work on my business. Was I that effective with how I was using my time? Probably not, but you don't learn that till later on. But what were the kind of things that you did? Because there'll be people listening now who are still in the classroom. They want to set a business up. They could get advice and insights from you. How did you manage your time? What did you actually do to get this business up and running?
So the short answer there is I jumped. The slightly longer answer is that I didn't have a plan B. I had no other option at that time than to leave if I wanted to create the headspace I needed to come up with answers and solutions. So I really didn't feel like I had a choice. But that said, I was so lucky that I have a supportive family behind me who helped me and who supported me with that decision. And it did mean real lifestyle changes. You know, the luxury's left, that's for sure. But it was what I needed to be able to move forward. And also at that time, I was listening to things that were subliminally helping me with this decision. And I know he's not quite flavour of the moment, but Steven Bartlett's podcast, The Diary of a CEO, was in those early days was really inspirational to me. And it started to sort of plant seeds in my mind that there might be another way. And in his books, he's come up with this concept of the 5 buckets. And they are knowledge, skills, network, resources, and reputation. And to build a strong and successful business, it's about filling those buckets. And so it became all about that. It became about putting every little bit of energy and attention and time into filling those buckets so that I could find a way to create an education business that served its purpose. All that said, I do know and I have met now so many people who are doing it differently to that and who are building really successful education businesses while still being in the classroom. And there are pros and cons to both. So whilst my approach meant that I was able to go all in, the approach to staying in the classroom or in schools means that you don't lose touch. It means that you get to still be a part of the thing that you are building your business around. And I think a brilliant example of that is ICT Mr. P, who has built an incredible business that really serves a brilliant purpose, but the whole way through, he's been a classroom teacher as well. And I think that's given him a real strength. Knowing that, have to work really hard to make sure that I keep really in touch with what's going on in the classroom in a way that I wouldn't have to do if I was still working in school. So pros and cons to both, I'd say.
We work with the circumstances that we have, don't we? And, part of that might affect the outcome that we have. I was still in schools on supply, but I did choose to step back a little and not be on long-term supply because it's very difficult to find the time as a teacher to do anything else, never mind grow a business. So, yeah, I think you have to find that way that works for you. And I can completely understand why stepping away was the right thing for you. But then it's more difficult to keep your hand in, so to say. Also, really glad that you brought up personal development. I am a massive advocate for that, mainly because I didn't discover it until quite a few years into my business. And it really, really helped me, especially when growing a team and understanding myself and understanding them as well. So because you are quite an early stage business, how do you grow your audience? How do you get in front of teachers and school leaders?
Well, because my business is primarily built on a philosophy rather than a product, the number one way that I have grown my audience and got in front of teachers, school leaders, parents has been through connection. So LinkedIn, I'm not hugely active on LinkedIn, but it has allowed me to meet lots of different people who are on the same mission as me, or at least who care about the same things. And it usually starts with a direct message in LinkedIn that's an invitation to having a coffee and a Zoom chat, so a virtual coffee. And that has just been brilliant because I work a lot on my own now. I'm used to working in schools with lots of people and having that lovely buzz. And it can be quite a lonely endeavour, I've found, going into business, especially in the way I am. So it's given me a sense of community, and those virtual coffees are about connecting with people, but it also grows the network. And that's sort of the brilliant extra bit that comes from those. So lots and lots of opportunities to meet people in that way have definitely created growth for my business. The other thing is going on podcasts. So I went on a podcast called Niche Talks. It's not an education podcast at all. And that podcast ended up being listened to by somebody who ran an education business, who absolutely shared my philosophy. And they ended up reaching out to me. We got along really well. We had lots of great conversations about how we envisaged we'd like education to look and feel. And I now find myself working for them as an associate. And that's taken me to the most wonderful places all over the world and given me an opportunity to work with a team within education, but still on my own terms and very much still underneath my own business, or inside my own business, if you like. So podcasting and speaking and talking when you have the opportunity, passionately, which I always do, I think, because I care so much about this, has really helped me to grow my audience. And then finally, I think saying yes to things that I've been uncertain about. So being okay with uncertainty. And if an offer comes your way or an opportunity, saying yes to it before you feel ready. And then you can really build on that and grow and spend a lot of time in your stretch zone for sure. But for me, it's been a brilliant way of making the most of opportunities that have come to me that I wasn't expecting. And more often than not, it's never as bad as you think, and there's always some learning to be done. So yeah, that too. And I have a friend who I met through networking and through LinkedIn who uses a phrase called being professionally generous. And I really like that, because what she's describing there is sharing ideas and thoughts and not gatekeeping, but helping each other out and offering time, but being okay with asking for time in return, and just sharing with other people who are in the same boat as you, and all supporting each other and bringing each other along is another great way I've found to grow a small, early business like mine.
It can be hard to know where to focus your time, can't it? And saying yes, but not saying yes to everything. How do you quantify that? And how do you decide whether a podcast, for example, is the right move? Because I'm sure when you went on that podcast, you had no idea what it could lead to. How do you know what to say yes to and what you need to say no to?
That's such a good question. And it's something that, for me, I've developed over time. And what I mean by that is, in the beginning, it really was a case of just saying yes to everything that came my way. And I needed to do that because I needed to grow my network. I needed to experience lots of different things. I needed to understand how this was going to work. And one of the biggest learnings that I've had overall is how much trial and error there is in growing a business. And that so much of it is test and fail and test and fail. And I think that applies here. There have been things that I've said yes to that have been brilliant and really fruitful in lots of different ways, personally and professionally. There have been other things that I've said yes to that in retrospect haven't been right, or that I didn't have the capacity for, or that didn't work in the way that I thought they were going to work. And I've just chalked that down to experience and to learning. But what it has done is it's helped me to fine-tune what really works for me. And I can tell the difference now between just saying yes to everything that comes my way and really picking out those things that are tempting to say no to because I'm scared of them, or I feel, what if I fail, or what if it doesn't go right? But essentially, if it goes well, I'll be really happy about that. I can tell the difference between those two things. I think the other thing I've learned is that honesty is really important in this type of situation. So I have got much of a better feel for when I'm at capacity and when I really can't take anything else on. And so sometimes I will get a direct message on one of my socials requesting a coffee and a chat and a get to know each other. And I'm really mindful that there are other people in this space who need to grow their network too. But if I am at capacity, I will just reply honestly and say, I can't give this the attention it needs, or I can't meet just now because I'm at capacity and I would want to turn up as my best present self, and I can't do that at the moment. I'll say, let's get in touch further down the line, or I'll just leave it with them. And if they get in touch further down the line and I do have time, that's great. So I think the short answer to that question is you get a feel for it, you know when you're at capacity, and it's a trial and error process.
Do you teach children as part of your business offering? Have you considered using resources from Classroom Secrets? At Classroom Secrets, we're always adding new resources for a range of subjects, and we're keen to hear your suggestions for resources too. We know that you didn't go into business to work more hours than you did in the classroom. You went into business to give you freedom. Let us help with that. Visit classroomsecrets.co.uk to sign up. You're 100% right, by the way. It is all about testing and learning, testing and learning, testing and learning, and sometimes learning that at a new level, learning it over again. Sometimes we don't really take the lesson the first time. So, yeah, it is this journey, isn't it, that you've got to go on. With that in mind, that you have to learn a lot of lessons in business, what's been the hardest lesson that you've had to learn?
Easily the hardest learning that I've had is that progress isn't linear. I left the classroom with such a strong belief, and I have such a strong passion for education, that I had decided that as soon as I had enough time to devote to a mission around making education happier, less stressful, and more relevant for young people and educators and school leaders, that belief would see me in forward motion always. And of course, that's not reality. And I now know that, and I've had enough experience of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, to now recognise that when I'm in one of those step back moments, I can be calm about that and know that that's what it is. I think it's very hard when you're on a solo endeavour with something, and not all of my work is solo, but much of the what if education stuff, the philosophy stuff, is on my own. And it can be really hard to know what to devote your time to. I think you've alluded to that earlier in the conversation, that you pour time and invest time and money into things and you think, I hope this is right, but you've nobody to bounce that off in that moment. And that is something that I've learned, and that is to include people in your ideas and take people's advice and critique and thoughts. Even if they feel a bit confronting, they're usually the best ones to get, because it can be really easy to just sort of be in a bit of an echo chamber of your own thoughts, and it can slow you down, or it can prevent you from really getting to a place that you want to be. So for me, it's been accepting that perfection is not a thing, and to chase perfection is chasing in the wrong direction, but it's always about moving forward where you can, but accepting that sometimes it'll feel like a backward step, and it is, but it will eventually become part of that progress, part of that moving forward. And an example of that has happened really recently for me, in that I had a real wobble over my communications across my website and my social media and my messaging. And, how do I now describe what this is? Because it's ever evolving. What if education is ever evolving? And the introduction of a book that I've written, which is very much about bringing curiosity into education, but stands slightly to the side of it. Whilst that was an amazing thing to achieve and to have done, it did send me into a bit of a headspin of, how do I now tie all this together and communicate effectively what this is all about? And I spent easily a good couple of weeks agonising over that. And the best way of dealing with it was to speak to other people and to get help. And I did do that eventually, but it's felt like a very recent step backwards. And now I'm over that hurdle. It's exciting because I can see a really clear path forward. I've got my messaging sorted out, and I can now push on again. But yeah, that's what it is. It's about knowing that progress is not exactly going to look how you want it to.
And that progress not being linear, I think, is extremely frustrating for us as entrepreneurs, because we want things to happen straight away. We're very passionate. We take massive action and then we want to see the results quickly. Even this morning, I've been waiting to do this thing. I've been waiting for today to do it because it's the school holidays and it'd give me more headspace. And I want to crack on with a list of things, but now I've got to wait because I've got to wait for somebody to come back to me. I've got to wait a few days and I'm like, oh, I just want to move things forward. But then there'll be other times where I'm really into something and maybe I don't feel like that's getting the results. So it doesn't go away, does it? It just continues that. I just want to say, Kate, thank you so much for being so honest in this conversation. What do you think we haven't talked about that we should have talked about that education business owners would benefit from knowing?
Oh, that's good. I think something that springs to mind for me that I wish I'd known that two things can be true at the same time, or that I'd had that insight that two things can be true at the same time when I first started on this adventure. And what I mean by that is that sometimes the very best part of running your own business and growing a business can also be the very worst part. And it's being okay with that. Something that helped me come to that insight was I listened to a podcast called High Performance. And it's with a psychologist called Damien Hughes, who is a bit of a hero of mine. I love how he communicates. I love how he expresses his thoughts and how he makes quite complex psychological things really simple. And he's written a book called Liquid Thinking. Really recommend it. It's a great read. And so I started listening to this podcast because he was on it. And what's really interesting to me about this is at the end of every episode, they ask their guest, what's your biggest strength and what's your greatest weakness? And nearly every single time, the answer is their biggest strength is also their biggest weakness. And I think that's so true of running your own business. And for me, for example, freedom of time and autonomy is one of the very best things about having my own business and working in this way after being so constrained in terms of time when I was in the classroom. But having freedom of time and autonomy is also really difficult, going back to what we've talked about earlier, in that where do you put that time? All of a sudden, you've no role description and you've no clear measurement, if you like, at first anyway, of whether what you're doing is worth that time and whether what you're doing is right in that moment. So the freedom is brilliant and freeing, of course, but it's also constrictive and it can be really difficult. So I think that's probably something that I've had to learn to get used to and to be okay with the fact that when you are running your own business, two things can be true at the same time.
I'd normally finish the conversation at this point, but I've got a bonus question for you. If we were to have this conversation in 3 years' time, what would have had to have happened for you to feel proud of the journey?
Oh, I'm so glad that you found time to squeeze this question in because this is something I've definitely had to work on, but has made a big difference to how I feel about work and about this business that I'm shaping up. And that is taking time to stop a minute and reflect on how far I've come. You know, we set big goals and then inevitably an amount of time happens between setting the goal and achieving it. And things evolve in that time and lots changes. And in my experience, I find that I get to that goal that was once a huge goal, but by the time I get there, that's now much smaller and I've got bigger goals in place. And it's really easy to forget just how important that thing that you've just achieved was to you at one point. And those stepping stones sort of go by the wayside, or certainly they have for me, unless I purposefully stop a minute and look back and reflect on, one, how far I've come, and two, where I've exceeded the expectation. So many times where I've just been ploughing on, carrying on, and then I'll stop a moment and it'll be a bit of a pinch me, like I can't quite believe this actually. And if I hadn't made that time to reflect, it would have just whizzed by. And I think for mental health and how you feel about being able to carry on when times are hard, you do need those checkpoints and those moments to just reflect and go, I'm doing okay, you know. And I think in answer to that question, if I were to look back in 3 years' time and think about what made me feel proud about this journey, I'd be okay saying I'm already proud. And if I continue to work how I am, as hard as I am, and continue to try and be open and reflective and excited about positive change, then hopefully I will continue to feel proud of the work that I do and proud of this little business that I am building.
As I was listening to you talk, then I thought to myself, oh, it's the pinch me moments. And then you went on to say it. I agree with that. You have to find moments to give you those pinch me moments. I think there was a period of time where we had more of those pinch me moments because we were reflecting more. And now we try and bring those in deliberately. And the reason for that is those pinch me moments are about building faith. You need faith to build a business. You need to believe it's going to happen. And it's almost like proof that the faith worked and also evidence of why you should have faith. And so I think it's not just about seeing how far you've come. It's about giving you the fuel to build more in the future. Kate, thank you so much for being a guest and for everything you've shared. Thank you for listening to the Education Business Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Classroom Secrets. To find more resources to grow your business, visit classroomsecrets.co.uk.